do that.
Okay, so
Yep, we're ready to go.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. First item up, Keith is on.
Yep, hang on, I'm going to ask him to unmute. Let's see. There we go.
Okay, hello, Niles. Good evening. A very pleasant good evening to everyone. And to Susan and everybody else on the council. And it doesn't get any better weather-wise than the past couple of days. Agreed? Mm-hmm. Temperatures in the 70s, humidity in the 30s. Now, it gets hotter and more humid on the weekend. Temperatures up around 90, but that's not too bad. It could be mid to upper 90s, or we could be sweltering like out west in Phoenix, where it's between 115 and 120 degrees. Most of Saturday and Sunday will be there'll be mostly sunny, only a small chance of thunderstorms each day in the late afternoon. And it appears that for our Independence Day celebration, the temperatures will be in the 80s, which is below normal for July 4th. Usually we're talking about temperatures in the low 90s with chance of afternoon thunderstorms. So keep your fingers crossed on that, because that's going to be a big day for everybody that I know everyone is looking forward to. That should wrap up the weather segment of the meeting. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Council, for letting me be heard.
Thank you, Keith, and thanks for that forecast. And I think we're going to hold you to that July 4th. So we're very grateful if it works. So,
okay.
Sounds like a drought, too. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so next up, opportunity for resident comments. Again, we probably have a lot of people wishing to speak. We would ask that you state your name and street for the record, and keep in mind that everything is recorded. And keep your comments to 2 minutes, please, because we do have limited time and a lot on the agenda. So with that, does anyone wish to make a comment?
I saw Katie Howard.
Katie?
Hi, okay. Thank you for letting me go first. I'm Katie Philipchek Howard of Taylor Street. I want to just ask a couple questions and make a couple of points, because I have a conflicting event this evening, so I won't be able to stay for the whole meeting. I just wanted to say how grateful I am for the successful outcome of the VMA election into the Elections Committee. And I'm looking forward to being sworn in along with Andrew in 2 weeks. And, first and foremost, I would just like to thank the outgoing council members, Todd and Katya. I appreciate Todd's most recent service and that he returned after serving previous terms to the council, and for Katya's consecutive years of service. And it's also, since the election, I've had the opportunity to meet all of the council members actually in person, and everyone is much taller off of Zoom. And but in all seriousness, I'm looking forward to in-person council meetings again when that might be safe to do so. And secondly, I just the deadline for the American Rescue Plan application is June 30th, the day before swearing in of the new council members. And I just wondered, will the VMA be applying, and who is handling the application process, and is there a plan for these potential funds? And then just lastly, in the discussion of committee formations, I would like to propose a new or temporary communications outreach committee that could address issues of the listserv and the Martin's Edition newsletter, more improved ways for resident recognition. And so I just wanted to put that forth. But goodbye to Todd and Katya. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Miles, do you want to just quickly address the ARP stuff?
Certainly. So yes, the village is applying. I was actually on a call today with the state and MML, the Maryland Municipal League, about how we do it. There's some technical things that I'm working out, actually. Arthur, I'm going to give you a call tomorrow because there's some technical things with our accounts and things like that. As for any, so yes, we're going to do it. We have the deadline. I've been in constant conversation with our accountant as well. I should point that out as well. So the short answer is I am handling it, but doing it to receive the money. As for how it will be used, there are certain uses. The Treasury Department is still, they have what is called their interim final rule. So we don't have the final rule yet, but there are some things that have been looked at. The biggest thing that applies to the village is there are provisions to improve things via related to stormwater management, or not stormwater management, I should say, to improve infrastructure to be more storm resilient and things like that. And that was one issue that we're looking at. Actually, I got an email from Section 3. They are looking at wanting to make improvements to Brookville Road and partner with the state. And that's something that has been on our agenda. We'll talk about this a little bit later, too, with Doug's report. But so they have asked the village, the Section 3 has asked the village to also look into the improvements in Brookville Road. We don't have a set plan or anything like that. They are still in the planning phases. But that's one of, under the allowed uses, that's one of the ways we're pursuing it. And once we get more details, we can decide more. But we have until December 31st, 2024 to expend the funds. And then we have until December 31st, 2026 to actually spend the money. So this is not something that has to, we can develop a plan. In fact, the recommendation from the state is to sort of think of these things that will come in two chunks, one this year and one next year. And so we can work out how to do it over the coming months. So that's the long and the short of it. And I will not repeat that for the manager's report then.
Thank you, Niles. Okay, does anyone else have a comment?
All right. Raise your hand. Okay. I see Susan Kahn, yeah. So I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then we can go there.
Niles, could you please unmute?
Yeah.
Hi.
Yep.
Okay.
I was going to make a couple of comments. First, thank you to the election committee for running the election, and I know that's a lot of work, and there's a lot of volunteer hours that go into that. I was going to mention quickly that I understand there were 3 maybe uncounted votes or ballots that didn't work because people didn't put something on the outside of the envelope. I feel like we're a small enough municipality to actually go and try to cure the votes, or if not cure them, contact those people to find out what's going on. Did they know they were supposed to do that? Did they have some health issue? Did they have some tremor? Did they just forget to sign it? I think they should know that, so that next time, let's say an election could be swung by 3 votes. We wouldn't want to have to reproduce an entire election because we're going to simply throw out 3 ballots. So I think it's worth it. We're small enough to try to actually figure out what happened with those 3, because we have a control number on the ballot. We know the address. There's a person there. We can contact them. And I think that's the right thing to do. And I just don't see why not. Let's make it work for next time, so that, we have some process also in place in case this does happen next time, that we only have a 3-vote difference and we have to figure that out. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say, I realize we have limited time, is that I do think it's so important for our municipality to register some opposition to the ZTA 1907, which is a basic giveaway of our public rights of way. And whether the federal government's doing it, the state or the county, if you think that they have our best interests in heart or in mind when they're passing this, I think you're absolutely not getting the best legal advice that you could. I think you should I really encourage you to get good legal advice with telecom background, because you hold the keys, you hold the treasure. It's your rights of way right now. You get to determine what happens there and having input. And this DTA absolutely and uncategorically takes that away. It is not necessary to put a cell tower for 5G service 30 feet from a home. Even Verizon says for that type of 5G spectrum, it can go from 1,500 to 3,000 feet. They do not need to be that close. So I just encourage you to find that out. I gave a presentation with some other people to some mayors, and I want to offer to give that to any council members who would like to have, or residents. I and other people who gave that presentation would be happy to give it. We were invited by the mayors of 3 municipalities in Montgomery County and recently gave a PowerPoint presentation. There's a letter that's been circulating among municipalities that you all could sign on to register your objection, and I encourage you to look at that letter. I think it's been sent to some of the people on the council, and to look at the PowerPoint and to look at the actual ZTA, the actual words, and again to get legal counsel with that background. And again, I'd just be very happy to talk to anyone about this anytime. Feel free to call me, whether you're on or off the council or you're a resident. I'm glad to talk about this because it's a very confusing and kind of thick topic. But I think the more you learn about it, you'll realize that we actually have 5G service low band and mid band all throughout our county already. And they're talking about one very specific type of service that would require poles to be placed 30 feet from your home. And there is no technical need for that. The only advantage to the telecoms is they get to target their users, which is people on the street driving by and walking by with phones. It is not residents. So I don't want us to give away our property rights, our aesthetics, control or input on aesthetics for that. So that's it. Yeah.
Susan, I think that's Tiffany there to respond to the election issue.
Hey, Tiffany?
All right, I'm asking her to unmute.
Tiffany?
I had a resident comment. We'll do the election report when you guys do the committees.
Can you respond to the quick a response to the question about the presumed three ballots?
There were 3 ballots that nothing was filled out on the outside of them. So 3 ballot return envelopes, no signature, no printed name, no street address or date. Nothing was there. And given the rules from this year and last year, they were not counted. We had more than 420 other people able to fill it all in.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Okay. And did you
So can I do my resident
another comment? Yes.
Well, Katie Howard kind of stole some of my thunder and just saying I'm excited for in-person things. So thank you for July 4th. Looking forward to that. Also looking forward to upcoming meetings in person. I know that the Open Meetings Act waivers or loosening is closing. That window is closing. And so I look forward to meetings returning to being in person. Just with regard to Katya and Todd, thank you so much, both of you, for your time and energy. I remember when Katya joined the council, and it was nice to have another working outside of the home mother with young kids on the council. And so, her voice and spearheading of the annual survey that we still do, the streetlight project, taking what others had worked on for years and driving it to decision points and conclusion. For those who enjoy leaf vacuuming, make sure you say thank you to Katya Hill. She took that on. And that's now been rolled in with street cleaning, which is the service that we were doing anyway. And for Todd's return to the council, I think 18 months of steady, calm, thoughtful leadership and helping just bring to conclusion some of the RFPs that were out, whether it was the cyber or financial projects, working with Arthur, and then making sure that the recommendations from those consultants were put into place in the office. I think that's they're administrative things that most people will never see. I was fortunate enough to see them, and I'm thankful. I'm a resident now that doesn't have anything to do with it, and I still appreciate it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Tiffany, very sweet. Thank you so much.
And I would second those comments as a resident.
Thank you, Susan.
Does anyone else have comments?
Yeah. So
Marty
had her-
Langland has her.
Yep.
Some
I
hand up.
asked her to unmute. There we go.
Everybody?
Hi, everybody, and thank you. I would like to say that I'm very happy with the election results, and I appreciate everyone who voted for good government. And I look forward to working with Andrew and Katie and the others on the council going forward. A couple quick points. I want to follow up on Susan Kahn's point about the importance of this 5G zoning amendment that our county council is looking at. And I really, really think it's important for the Village of Martin's Additions to sign that letter that's going from the other municipal governments, because this proposed amendment as it stands would completely disempower Martin's Additions. It takes away our control of our right-of-way, it takes away our property rights, it would affect property values. There's lots of really substantive damage that this ZTA 1907 would do. And so please sign the letter. The second thing I wanted to ask is to have Niles put in the weekly wrap-up this week the information for how residents can contact our county council. I'd like to see the county council's emails in a little note there, because this is something that could affect everybody's property values. Some people also think it has health impacts because of radiation. The jury might be out on that, but I'm concerned about it for a lot of reasons, and I think that we need to really take action quickly, because according to Andrew Friedson on the county council, I got a letter from him earlier this week, he says their county council's next working session on the 5G zoning amendment is coming up the first week of July, early July, and so we only have 2 weeks to get our comments in. And there's a lot of good reasons for Martin's Additions residents to be very concerned about this ZTA 1907. And there's some short information about it, but if you look at the pictures, I think Larry Watson had pictures at the safety committee meeting the other night of what these boxes look like. It's not just a 50-foot pole in front of your house 30 feet away. It's big boxes that block the right-of-way. It's really, say it's unattractive is an understatement. So there's lots of reasons why residents should be writing to our county council members saying, do not adopt ZTA 1907. And I think that it would be a real community service for Niles to put the information about this in this weekly wrap-up, along with the email addresses for the county council members on this. The last thing I want to add is that I am concerned about the appointment process for volunteers coming up in July. The new council, of course, is the one who appoints the volunteers. Last year, the process was somewhat confusing. There was like one brief note, one-liner somewhere in a weekly wrap-up or somewhere. Normally, what we've done in the previous 5 years, previous to last year, was put out a separate announcement listing the committees and provide people with an opportunity to follow a procedure for applying, including giving a short, like 2-sentence bio or reason why they wanted to be on committee, A, B, C, whatever. There was a formal process for appointing volunteers in the village in the past. That process was not followed last year. And I'm concerned that we make sure that we follow a good, clean process for recruiting and volunteering and retaining volunteers this year, because so much of the important work of the village is done by volunteers. So I would ask the incoming council to be sure that we have plenty of time for new volunteer recruitment and a separate announcement on it and more information about it, that we do it in a very open fashion this year, not the way it was done last year. So please take a look at the volunteer appointment process. And again, I think that it's up to the new council to do that, not the outgoing council. So thank you.
Well, I would just like to correct a couple of his statements there. Of course, it's up to the new incoming council to make the appointments. There was absolutely the same process followed last year. There was a constant contact message sent out in late June or early July last year. I found that constant contact message, which did have a link for anyone interested in serving on a committee to fill out the survey as to which committees they would like to serve on.
It provided no information,
and
Susan.
it did in fact say that we would welcome new members, and of course, I'm not sure that it said, but of course we respect experienced volunteers as well. We, in fact, did not have a surfeit of volunteers, which may be why there was some misunderstanding as to the process. But we did follow the same process. So,
actually, no, we didn't, Susan, but
Yeah,
that's all right. We disagree on that.
Well, I have the facts, so that's fine.
Excuse me, so do I.
Does anyone else have a comment? Anyone else? Comments?
No.
Okay, so I think,
Susan, this is Jeff. If the residents have finished their comments, I was just going to chime in real quickly. Thank you for that. So just a couple things. First, I just want to start off. Tiffany, thank you for, again, all your efforts, and again, as other folks noted with the election and how smoothly it was obviously a very intensive election, and I sat in and listened in as the counting was occurring and everything, and I think you folks really handled it so well and professionally, and we appreciate that. One comment that you'd mentioned around the return to in-person, I just want to put out there, and Niles, I know you're on top of this, is that investigating the idea of a hybrid approach, because we know and we've heard that Zoom is kind of part of our fabric, and it's not just here at VMA, but again, I work within the federal government, and we see this as something as part of our DNA going forward. So I know that Niles is going to be looking into equipment that could expand that capability. So a model of in-person as well as calling in. A couple other really quick things. And this is more administration, and I just want to put it out there. Niles, I want to thank you so much. And Marty, you mentioned around committees. So I just want to put out there, and I'm just going to provide feedback right here and now. There's a draft announcement about the committees that is planning on going out apparently this week. And it's a little bit different because last year the announcement went out after I had taken oath. And then the solicitation happened while and fully under the new council. So at this time, it's expected to go out this week and perhaps close on July 2nd, which is only about a day after the new council takes oath. So I'm going to suggest two things on that announcement. The first is that any draft announcement that goes out, if it's going out in June, to please respectfully share that with the council members elect so that they could actually provide some input on that announcement. And then the other piece, which I was going to also suggest, is rather than having a closing date of the 2nd of July, which I don't necessarily see why, again, it doesn't really model what happened last year, I would open that up to at least perhaps July 13th. Because as Susan is mentioning, I think, by opening up more time, you perhaps actually have an opportunity for more residents to provide and step up and volunteer. And I think these are pretty innocuous suggestions. The second administrative note, and then I'll turn it back over to the chair, is specific to actually the new council. We know we have a lot of pressing issues. We have a big, July 4th celebration coming up. There are some of these things around 5G. There's obviously the committee piece, and working with Arthur, with Susan, and the new council members is that we should schedule an administrative meeting very soon, whether it's July 1st or July 2nd, where we meet internally and discuss the leadership structure of the council going forward for the new year. And with that said, and one last thing with the 5G, I totally concur. I think that we should have at least a position. I know that Ron has been in tune on this, maybe not for VMA, but I know he's attended some meetings, and it'd be great to understand where ZTA might affect our rights around what we could perhaps regulate, and that we have a seat at the table. With that said, I'm going to turn it back to the chair, and I hope that other council members take up my administrative call. Thanks.
So can I just jump in on that, Susan? I know, Andrew, if you don't mind giving me a sec. So I'm just curious, I don't have any problem with the call for, sitting on committees going out early. I mean, if give people a lot more chance. I'm just wondering, Niles, was there any reason for having such a tight deadline like July 2nd?
Well, my first thought, you're right. I mean, my first thought was simply it's 2 weeks from now, and I thought if we had a confirmation on the language, it could go out. People could have plenty of time. I think one thing that I wasn't thinking about, and I certainly think that this makes sense, is of course July 2nd is the day of the July 4th weekend. So clearly, in looking at the calendar, sometimes you think you're thinking in dates and not necessarily in real life. So I think there is I think it makes sense that we want to maybe give people a deadline after the 4th of July holiday, if that's what the council wants to do, just to make sure that people have time around the holiday, and so I can understand that concern, and so that was my literally looking at the calendar.
So it's just that point. So I think if we can give people more time, if we can communicate more, if it gives us another week or two to communicate, to give people a chance to respond in time for the new council members to review and the like, I think let's give it to them. I mean, let's get it out early and have it be as informed as possible. I agree. I mean, let's give Katie and Andrew a chance to look at it too and see if they want to have any input and go from there. So I think that all that makes good sense.
And I appreciate that. And I think Arthur, in the feedback I got already on that email, had also included Katie and Andrew on there. So.
And you and I had discussed it as well, Mike.
Yes. So I've gotten feedback from various people already. So I can. Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement, and we could just keep it open until the 9th or something. And that would give everyone time to be settled, for Katie and Andrew to be settled in their new positions, and for everyone to review the applications.
All right. I will adjust the language and send it back around just so that everybody's okay with that. Okay?
Do we have more comments, or are we ready to hear from
Andrew wanted to say something, so I'm just going to.
Andrew?
Hey, real quick. Just again, also, I don't want to be the only one here who didn't thank the outgoing council members. So, and I think I've done that at a previous, but this is your last official act here, and I wanted to thank you, Katya and Todd, as well for your service. I know it's not always easy, and you're often in the crosshairs. So I really appreciate you managing and surviving your tour of duty. So thank you. And also thank you to Tiffany. And also I wanted to mention Mark for his efforts on the ethics committee. I wanted to thank him as well. And also I saw Alex briefly. I don't know if he's still on, but I wanted to thank the other candidates who ran during this election, including Marty. And I saw Alex. I don't know if Larry or anyone else or Brian's on, but that was the only other item I wanted to add. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so now are we ready to hear from our officers?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Let me unmute Mike. There we go. I'm going to start with Mike because I think he was going to take lead, and then if Nick has.
There I am. Okay. Yeah. I will take lead. I know Nick is juggling meetings and things with work and here. So thank you for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. My name is Mike Pratt. I'm a lieutenant with the county police, and I'm also one of your community officers. I know we're on a time limit here, and I want to make sure I leave time for any questions. So just let me give you a quick briefing. It's summertime. Vacations are here. Please continue to be vigilant in your neighborhood, surrounding areas. Great example of your vigilant just occurred last week. The home in the 7200 block at Delfield Street that's slated to be torn down. There was a resident or residents that noticed the front door was ajar. There was a chair next to a window, and some plywood was removed from it. It was reported to the village office. The village office reported it to Nick and I. The village office was able to quickly get in touch with the contractor and have the situation resolved. And Nick and I continue to conduct checks on the house. But please continue to report items like that. I will say that if you actually see suspicious activity in real time, obviously contact our non-emergency number. It's 301-279-8000 so that an on-duty patrol officer can respond. Moving on, as all of you are probably aware, last month we unfortunately had an auto theft and burglary on Taylor Street where the suspects rummaged through the residents' vehicles and then entered the rear door of the home and stole a set of car keys. They then subsequently stole a vehicle in the driveway. I had the chance to personally speak at length with the victim in that case, and it was tremendous to see the steps that were already taken to ensure that the family's safety going forward, which was awesome. During my patrols, I also had multiple conversations with residents where they sort of reiterated the fact that they're going to remain vigilant. So that was terrific to hear. Finally, I just want to reiterate the importance of locking your car doors at all hours of the day and night. Theft from autos are still the #1 crime in Montgomery County. Please continue to contact our non-emergency number to file a police report. It only takes a few minutes, and it helps out in our Bethesda district. It helps them deploy officers appropriately based on those reported crimes. And as they probably will mention, Nick and I are continuing to work hand in hand with your new public safety committee. We look forward to continuing that work just to ensure that the village is a safe and attractive place for you all to live. I don't know if Nick is available right now. I'll switch it over to him if he is. If not, if we have time questions, there it is.
Yep, I asked him to unmute, so he should.
All right, sorry. I apologize. I'm kind of balancing two different meetings at once, but want to try. The one other thing I mentioned, crime-wise, we have seen, and it's not a Martin's Additions issue, but it definitely is a county-wide issue. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Is that we have seen increasing carjackings in Montgomery County over the last several months, to the point where we actually had, I believe, 4 in a week in Montgomery County, which is very unusual. And some in like the Wheaton area, not too far away from the village. We've also seen an increase in what we call jump-in car thefts, where somebody will leave their car running like in front of like a 7-Eleven, or they're getting gas, leave their car running, it's hot, and they want to keep the AC on, and someone will actually run to the car, jump in the driver's seat, and take off. So it's not necessarily classified as a carjacking because there's no assault involved with it, but it's still a pretty significant violent crime. So kind of in the same whole, it's not a Martin's Additions issue, but it's definitely something we're seeing, trending in the county, and want to make sure I got a plug for that as well. In addition to keeping your car doors locked, be on the lookout for, make sure if you're getting gas, you're running to the big store, turn your car off, lock your door. You don't want to leave your car running. One, it's illegal, and secondly, it's an invitation for people to try to take their car. So I just want to make that real quick plug. Other than that, Mike covered everything really well.
Thank you. Are there any resident questions?
So
for the officers, yeah.
So, yeah.
Hi, Katie Blitchek Howard again. I just wanted to thank Officer Pratt again. I am the victim of the Taylor Street theft, and I'll try not to get emotional and keep my comments brief. The good news is I got my car back within 24 hours. But the bad news is we're still quite shaken from it. But Officer Pratt came up to our door, and I hope you don't take this. He's a strapping young man, and he just made my 2 young daughters just feel safer by just that gesture to come up and talk to us about what happened. And so I'm really appreciative of that. And it was a real learning experience for all of us. I do lock my doors, and my car was locked. And still, they were brazen enough to come in and break in through my back door, take my key at 3 o'clock in the morning, go out and take my car for a joyride. And then it was found in D.C. So we're lucky. We're lucky. It could have been worse. One of us could have gotten up to go to the bathroom. I'm surprised it didn't happen. But I cannot thank Montgomery County Police and D.C. Police enough. It really we're shaken from it. It's hard to talk about, but thank goodness it was a good story in the end. And Officer Pratt, thank you so much for coming and meeting my family. It made us all sleep a little better that night. So thank you.
Yeah, on that note, I wonder if either Nick or Mike could say a word or two about community policing, which is the theory behind much of what they're doing. I know when we first hired you guys, you made a big point of this, and it's impressed me ever since. So if you could just say a word so people understand what that involves. Either one, I don't care who does it.
I asked them to unmute, so it should be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hang on.
There they go.
It should. There we go.
I can kind of touch on it. I mean, community policing is kind of one of those things where it's hard to define, but I know it when I see it. And what our role for the village really has been, and continues to be, is that we recognize that we're there, I think, Matt, 7% of the time, Mike and I are in the village. So our job is to be able to engage the community, meetings such as this, coming to, when election day was in person, that big festival happened outside, like that was a big day for us. Come and walk around and do and meet people. Mike, yes, 100% is a strapping young man. I will say he's older than me, but he is very strapping. And part of what we do is to be that resource. And when Niles has a question about an issue, he calls us and he's like, hey, what do I do with this? What do I do with that? And it's almost like we're police on retainers. So that's kind of how we treated the last 6 years, was we view ourselves as a resource, or 7 years now, a resource for the village, a resource for the office to come to us, ask questions, whether it be everything from, serious violent crime, like the robberies at the pharmacy, to parking complaints and everything in between. So that's kind of how we viewed our role here. We'll deter crime if we can. We'll catch criminals in the act if we can. I've arrested one person in my 7 years here. I've probably run 5 calls in the period of time here. We don't view ourselves as a criminal enforcement enterprise. Mike and I have done plenty of that in our careers. That's not what we're here for you. We're here as an outreach tool, as a information tool, as an engagement tool.
So I have a question for you, for either one of you. What's the level of coordination / communication between Montgomery County Police and DC Police? And I don't, I just hear stories, maybe it's urban myth, or I should say suburban myth, that something might happen here in Martin's Additions, and then the thieves or whatever go across the line to DC. What's that level of communication to follow up there?
As you can imagine, with our radio system, it's very easy. Right now, I could grab my police radio, and if I'm in Martin's Addition, I can flip right over to the DC channel that's their District 2, which is right over the line, and I could communicate openly and freely instantaneously. So we do have that route. On the back end, we have committees. Nick is on a bunch of them. Our sharing, our informational sharing, as you can imagine, ever since 9/11 is through the roof, especially with all of our coworkers there in DC. So that used to be a problem. We used to have to patch in our radios to talk to Prince George in DC. That's no longer an issue. We can all operate on the same band, if you want to call it. So we have that instantaneous access, which is great because we didn't have that before.
Thank you.
And this is Jeff Landry. I just want to say thank you so much. This has been so helpful, and I know that you both are probably going to drop off because you have many things that are pulling you, but wanted to share that very soon after you drop off, we have a group that's been working as part of a new safety task force, and Arthur knows this well because he works with me as a liaison on the task force, but we're doing a survey, and part of that survey is perceptions and collecting information on how safe our residents feel. So I think having that information will be a nice way to dialogue with you about the perceptions of our residents and how we might work with you further. So thanks.
And on that note, both Nick and Mike talking about being a resource, talk to Mark and Lynn Welly, who's not on the call right now, in their capacity on the Public Safety Task Force. So the police have also been helpful on that amount. Did I steal your thunder, Mark? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just to answer Todd's question, just from my experience. So when the first thing we did was report that our car was stolen, an officer was here within 20 minutes, and Montgomery County police detectives, the first thing they did was put it in a database, which is shared with Prince George's County and the Metropolitan Police. So they were all working off of the same database. And I think that's why it was returned to us so expeditiously. I mean, I got a call from a District 6 police officer first who found it. I had to wait a few hours because the DC police had to hand it over to Montgomery County because it was their case, and the detectives had to look. But the system is way more fluid now. It used to be more of an issue, I think, these border crimes. So they have a really strong database. That's what I learned from our experience, if that helps. So.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Katie. Good to know. Appreciate it.
So if there are no further questions, I would like to join in thanking Nick and Mike for their years of great service to the village. I think we're a stronger, better, safer village for your involvement. So thanks a lot. Thanks for showing up tonight.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So next on the agenda, we have committee updates. I guess we will start with the community engagement.
Can Mark, I know he told me earlier that Mark had, I think he had a family obligation, so I just wanted to let you know. I meant to tell you that earlier, Susan, so
yeah,
Mark gets to us.
Okay,
my apologies.
So Mark would like to go next. Is that?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, Mark Schaefer.
And I apologize.
Right, right. Just sorry I didn't know.
Oh, it's something I can't really talk about, but I greatly appreciate your courtesy, Susan. Let's start out by saying this. We've got our survey and ready to go, and I'll explain to you how we got there and what I mean by that. But I want to thank the council, Niles, what I call our two godfathers, Jeff and Arthur, who've attended all of our meetings and have guided us on everything we've done, and the two new members who have both been actively involved in our public meetings and very helpful. I didn't know what to expect in this process, but I have just found the community to be very collaborative in what we're trying to do, and I greatly appreciate it. I don't know how much you all know. I'll try to make this as brief as possible. We had, you all approved, the council approved us in February. We had a scope of work. Basically, we're to do a survey to figure out community priorities and concerns. Then we will analyze and study those concerns, and then look for options and opportunities and resources and costs related to any of these things, and present a report for the community and the council to decide what they want to do about those things, given our report. So we're an information service. We're not an advocacy service. Although if we make recommendations in our report, I guess it'll feel like advocacy. But we're really just trying to provide the best options for you as we see them. We now have a consensus on the concerns and desires that are to be dealt with in the survey, the methodology, the format, the questions, and it's been a fascinating process for me. As a lawyer, I tend to like do things myself or with one or two colleagues, and this was much more of a collaborative process with much more involvement, engagement, which quite frankly I had to get used to for a minute, and then I realized how cool it is and helpful it is. And what we did to figure out the survey part is, well, what we did to organize ourselves was to divide ourselves into three groups: the survey group, the safety group, and the health concerns group. And the groups were responsible for developing those areas for us all to jump into when they thought they had it together. And Rachel and Naomi were just amazing in doing this work. The proposals they made to us and the way they structured things and organized things and organized the way questions should be answered was so professional. And then we tested it, and we got results from about half a dozen or more people, mostly significant others and friends, just to see how it worked. And we got feedback there. We learned that the average time to take the exam, the survey was about 4 3/4 minutes. We did some work to cut that back. But what the result of all that was is some of the people who took the survey, and then many people at our next meeting, and then other people in emails started giving us lots of feedback and about not making sure the survey was not result oriented, that it didn't direct the answers, that we used closed questions rather than open questions. And so we learned a lot from all of you. And survey, just so we're clear, is we're not trying to tell people what to be concerned about. That's a political survey in national elections, but it's not what we're doing here. We're trying to understand what people are concerned about and want. All right, it will allow us to create some priorities for our study, share with the council and the community what the residents' priorities are, so everybody will know, and that'll give people time to think about it while we're doing our work, and how do we feel about that? Because we'll publish the results of our survey as soon as they're ready for all of you to look at, and then we'll use it for our study purposes. what we learned was that a lot of members, residents wanted us to recommend action, and we had to explain that's not our charter. There was a lot of talk about 5G. I'm glad you all are talking about it today. I would say that 5G was probably the hottest topic that was brought to us. It showed the most concern before the survey. I don't know what the survey is going to show, but it was the hottest topic in questions and requests and educating us. And I learned a lot and realized how much I'm going to have to learn going forward, assuming that 5G is one of the priority issues that the survey reveals. So we wound up with about 35 questions, and the answers allow people to say this is my language, it's not the actual professional language, very concerned, or less concerned, or opposed to the suggested inquiry. All right, and so the language is much better than what I just used, but that's sort of how it breaks out. So that all ranges of thought can be looked at. The focuses are safety related to crime, and we had a lot of help with the two police officers. We spent a couple of hours with them. I couldn't believe they could spend that much time with us, and they educated us a lot about community policing. And you'll see that while we're not suggesting things, we're asking for interest and concern and desires and wants related to community policing, and we'll see where it goes. And then the other areas of safety was traffic. And I know the walkability study is on your desk right now, and it's, as I've told you before, it's like one of the best community studies I've ever seen. But that doesn't tell me what's going to happen, and it also doesn't tell me what people want. So you'll see a little bit of overlap in our survey that sort of asks people what their concerns are and what they want, and then we'll share that information with you, and it'll inform your decisions about some of our recommendations, but it may inform some of your decisions about walkability as like an added benefit, but not what we're really trying to do. We just wanted to find out about the wants and the concerns. Then we looked at infrastructure safety, and I don't know where you put that. I think it's a safety issue, because the questions that were presented to us and the concerns were sort of related to not just 5G, which is half a health problem. And for some people it's a health problem, for some people it's a aesthetic or safety problem, and we'll sort all that out later. But there was also concerns about failures of our utilities and what we should do when a utility fails. I think Katie brought up the issue of gas mains that failed and the quality of the notices and the evacuation notices that went out. And so we're going to simply inquire as to how people feel all about that, whether they're concerned about it, and whether they have some desires for action about that. And then health sort of got combined with climate. It seemed to work for purposes of our questioning. I hope you'll all agree that it works. And health has different components, and 5G's in there, and so is climate, and so is maybe preventative things we can do in the future in case this happens again, like I'm afraid it will, but I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. And then we'll see how the community feels about the possibility of this kind of a thing happening again, and is there something we could do in advance to be more prepared as a community? Obviously, we're not healthcare officials and all that stuff, but is there something we can do? Then we also look for more on should it be a council or should it be a volunteer group level of, things we can do to be healthy or eat better and stuff like that, and how do people feel like that about that? And then the last piece was just inquiring about, it started out as an inquiry about how strongly people felt about things. And so would they think that we should have a committee that does this, or a group that does that, private group that does that, and would they volunteer for it? And it seemed to fit the survey at the time, but then a couple people, including Arthur, pointed out that because we asked people to name themselves and provide contact information, it flew into the whole idea of the survey being anonymous, which is important. So we have spun that off. You won't see it in the survey, but you may see going out because Niles and Jeff and people like that would like it to go out. But that's sort of going to be a decision made by a different group, I think, and as it should be. So here's the wrap up. I didn't realize how hard this would be, but I did find out that my task force, that's very pejorative. The task force consists of people that are incredibly knowledgeable, skilled, thoughtful, and kind, and respectful. They made the work stimulating and rewarding wherever this goes, and I'm gratified to have the new friendships. So there you go. That's my report.
Thank you, Mark. Okay.
Last thing. Niles plans. Our plan is for Niles to get it out, unless there's an objection. The plan is for Niles to get it out by Monday. I figure 2 weeks or so to respond, and then once we have the data tallied, we'll share it with you all, and then we'll start going to the next level on it, which is the study and inquiry and analysis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. If Keith is available.
Susan, I had a quick question. Is there, I assume it's already perfunctory, but we don't need to make a vote, so we're ready to go on sending the survey out when the administration is set up.
Okay, Susan, I'm on here with the engagement committee.
Keith, can you take 1 second?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
So,
I just want to make Mark sure that his job is done and they're ready to get out the gates there. So Niles, go.
Yeah, I was just going to go ahead. I mean, when we did the walkability survey last year, it didn't require council approval. We obviously just the same thing, the same process happened. Once everybody was good with it, we just sort of sent it out, had a meeting where it was discussed. So just following the same process as last year with the walkability survey. Okay?
Right. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, then I'll just say, Mark, you thanked everyone else, but I'm sure Arthur would say this as well, and everyone else, but you have been a maestro, and we are all so grateful and thankful that you've shared this, and Amanda and Rachel and Naomi and Lynn have all been just incredible. So we thank you and thank everyone for their service.
All right, gang. Like I told you, I have to get off. And goodbye, and thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to do this work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks. Okay, so now, Keith, if you're available.
Yes, Susan, thank you. Niles and I are in the process of getting everything lined up for the event, which I believe Niles has done. The only thing now is a question of, I guess, logistics as to where they'll be placed, and I think we've got that figured out too.
So, yeah, if you don't mind, Keith, I can just sort of speak to that a little bit. We are pretty much all confirmed with the vendors. They're similar vendors to last year. There's a couple of changes. The main one being the balloonists / face painters that were last time. The gentleman who did it last time, for a reason that I won't get into now, can't do it this year. So he gave the recommendation of someone else who could do the same thing. So we confirmed with them. And then the Claiborne Ice, I think, who was the vendor who did the ice shaves in 2019. At that time in 2019, the committee and I think council members expressed concerns about the fact that they showed up late, that they didn't have enough for everyone, and that they, so I wasn't here, so I don't know the full story, but the decision, what I did is a resident had made a recommendation of a vendor they had used for an event, and so we sort of went forward in that direction, just given the concerns in 2019 about the previous vendor. So, just so that you're aware, those are the main changes. We're trying to fit everything as it was last time, just for the sake of getting everything done.
Okay, Niles, thank you.
Yeah.
And Susan, thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for all your hard work, and thanks for working so diligently to make this happen. I know so many young families in the village are really excited to be have this returning and get their kids out there to have some fun. So thanks for all your really great work.
You're welcome. Thank you, Susan.
Susan, I just want to second that, and I want to say, Keith, but also just give a shout out to Sally and Renee. And, one thing to just point out very briefly about this is clearly this is not the typical year, right? This is our first big event after just a terrible pandemic that has been overriding everything. And I share this because it shouldn't be lost as part of the process was Keith, Renee, and Sally had called an open meeting and had residents come in. And I really thought it was just such a wonderful process. It had a really great turnout. And there's just this overwhelming feeling of really making this happen. I share this because not every catchment and community in Chevy Chase is doing this. And I think because of Keith and Renee and Sally's leadership, and also Susan and Tiffany, who also had expressed, initially how great of an idea this would be to open this up, and other members of the council, that we've come together. And again, I think it's a really great example of the council working with the community. And that's why I think there's such a good feeling about this, is that we all did this very openly and transparently and together. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next up, I think we have the election committee report.
Oh, do you want, I think Mark wanted to do the ethics, or do you, oh no, yeah.
Either way, Mark,
Either way.
if you're anxious to do ethics. If you're ready, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and this will be short. Mostly it's made so that during the transition of the council and of the committees, some of this does not get lost. We had a meeting of the Ethics Committee on May 17th. The entire committee attended, which is Debbie Rumel, Lori Mitchell, and myself. We had 3 current council members attend, Todd, Susan, and Jeffrey Blander, and 12 members of the community and Niles. There really are 3 things I want to mention. First of all, Debbie Rumel noticed in the ordinance that has been posted on the website that there is an inconsistency. You'll remember when the ordinance was adopted by the council, it was limited to members of the council, to the ethics committee, and to the elections committee, plus I think the tree supervisor. And that is picked up in section 4-101D, and the wording is correct. However, later in the statute, which is section 4-204B, it is not limited in the same manner. So we think this is just a glitch in the preparation of the final statute. So we would ask that the council and Ron both correct the statute so that it's consistent. It's consistent, and it's also consistent with the way it was adopted by the council. So you have the 2 paragraphs in question again are section 4-101D and section 4-204B.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked a little bit about the future and some ideas that we might want to pass on to both the upcoming council, the current council, and to next year's ethics committee. And these are ideas. We have not voted on any of them, but there are ideas that we think should be considered. Lori raised the idea of having staggered terms for the members of the committee. That would require a change in the VMA code, I believe, but it is something that we wanted just to lay out there. It's also something that should, in my opinion, come from the council, not from the committee, but it is a suggestion that we wanted just to have in the record. The next suggestion was mine, which is that the council and the new ethics committee should discuss the idea of having a training session together with instructional materials for the members of the committees and the council and the employees who are going to be covered by the ethics ordinance, both the new ordinance, or the ordinance as amended, and the old ordinance. During the whole ordinance process, there was considerable input from residents who offered to run training sessions, to write training manuals and the like, write a volunteer handbook. So I think that if the council decides that's a worthy idea, that is something that seems to me that there is likely to be some body of volunteers who would be happy to put that together. And it's something that the ethics committee could also do, I think, fairly easily and fairly quickly for the new committees, even if the materials are not totally prepared in time. So that's a suggestion. Again, we didn't vote on that, but it's a suggestion we put before you. So those are the only matters I wanted to raise, other than the fact that we also spent a lot of time talking about the committee's protocols for the emails, for the committee's email address that we've just been given. And I don't want to go, it's all contained. If anybody's really interested in the protocol, it's in the minutes. The minutes are already posted. But I really want to thank Niles and Lori Mitchell for walking us through that process. It was pretty detailed. We had a lot of, Lori had done background on other committees. So I think we came up with a protocol that certainly works for the ethics committee now. It obviously can be changed going into the future. But I wanted to do a shout out to Lori and Niles for walking us through that process. So that is all I have to report, unless you have more questions.
Thanks very much, Mark. We really appreciate all of your hard work this year. I think I understood that we do not need to take any actions to have that language reconciled.
Correct. So, right. So Ron had commented that, because it was a straight up sort of technical adjustment, it was made, and so it's posted as is, and the code has been updated to reflect that as well.
Right.
Thank you.
And thank you for your suggestions.
This is Jeff. I just had, first of all, Mark, I know you may drop off, so I just wanted to very quickly jump in and say I want to thank you and Debbie and Lori and of course Niles and Todd, again, all the work that you've done over the 8 or 9 months to the final product, and obviously everything that you had been part of, the tension and the intensity, but you handled yourselves with such professionalism in moving through, and again, a heartfelt thanks for this. And I just want to, as you're just on, I'll make this very brief, but so Niles, quick question, administratively, the staggered terms, again, I think it's a wonderful idea, and other catchments in Chevy Chase and elsewhere do it. So does that in any way, would that affect our call for volunteers? Could we still have that? And then as a new council, we could take this up and then work that in parallel to soliciting for new volunteers?
Right. So I think Ron can comment on this too. But my understanding is that for certain committees, mainly the election committee and the ethics committee, it's by charter that they are 1-year terms and they end at the end of the fiscal year.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is absolutely correct.
And so it would require to change that to create something like staggered terms or extend the length of the term or however you'd want to do it, would require a charter amendment. For other things, I'll let Ron speak to that. Or I can finish what I was going to say, and then if Ron wants to, he can comment. And so my understanding is that would take it. I think for other things, the community engagement committee or the task forces or any of those things you could do, but again it would be one of those things that would probably be best done by policy, or by resolution, and so that would be probably the way to do it, just to make it formally adopted. So Ron, what do you think?
Yeah,
Before Ron comes in, if I wasn't clear, this was just an idea. It was not voted on by the committee. I'm not professing whether it's a good idea, a bad idea, or an in-between idea. But I just didn't want it to get lost as their transitions take place. So I just wanted to make that clear if I wasn't clear already.
Fully understood. Fully understood.
All right. Ron, were you going to say something then?
I agree with you, but I believe the term is set forth in the code, not the charter.
Oh, okay.
Just check it, make sure that's right.
Yeah, I want to say that.
Yeah, section 2101 of the code.
Of the code. Thank you very much. My apologies.
But would require an ordinance.
Yes, it would require an ordinance, not a charter amendment, which is, that creates separate processes. So, yes, clarifying that it is the code.
Okay.
All right.
So.
That's awesome. So again, that's a decision that's yet to be made, and that could be under the new council. I had one question: is Mark still on, or if he dropped, that's okay. I can ask Ron.
I'll ask him to unmute.
No, it's okay.
I'm here.
This is a very dumb question, and this might be part of my training. And so, if you don't have a quick stand answer, then please we'll take this offline. But my dumb question is, wait, Daddy's just going to ask a dumb question, and then I'll come and help you. Okay? 1 second, honey. So my dumb question is, if someone submits an ethic complaint or something that would go to the ethics committee, my understanding is they can also submit the same thing to the council. And I'm curious, is there a process where the council and the committee would harmonize, or is there a firewall? So I'm just wondering, could there ever be two separate investigations happening for the same thing, or would it be harmonized? Because I know we've talked about how, for example, this wouldn't preempt the council from hearing anything, but I was just wondering, is it happening in a firewall, or do the council and the committee somehow, are they in communication, so you're having just one adjudication initially?
So the way that I don't have the new code sitting in front of me, but the way it is drafted is the ethics complaints come to the ethics committee. And then the ethics committee, this is for nearly all the complaints, goes through the process that's laid out in the code. And unless the council is involved, or a council member is involved, or the council can't come up with a quorum, the committee's recommendation goes to the council, which makes the final decision. I guess that said, there is nothing to prohibit somebody from filing a complaint directly with the council, but the council then would have to decide, Jeffrey, how it wants to handle it. But the code itself makes the ethics committee the proper place for ethics complaints to be filed. So if somebody filed it with the council, that would be up to the then council to decide how it wanted to handle it. That's my understanding.
Thanks, Mark.
Does that answer you, Jeffrey? You're on
Oh,
mute.
yeah. I'm asking him to unmute.
Yep. For sake of time, we can follow up, and it does make sense. And like I said, it may be that rare occasion, but if there is that kind of dual filing, it's more of just, is there a firewall? So would we even know? Because again, I think the ethics committee is meant to be kind of a separate arm, and really, it's if we're not talking to each other to maintain that separate arm, is it possible we could be looking at the same thing and not know about it? That was the only thing. And we could follow up offline because that's a real in the weeds question, but it's possible and we want to kind of rectify that, I think. So.
Yeah, it's certainly worth talking about, Jeffrey. It seems to me that anything is possible, and that's possible.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Mark, so much.
Susan, I have nothing more unless some other more questions.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate your very diplomatic answers as well. Anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think now we're ready for the election committee report.
The one thing I say is just Katya has her hand up, so I don't know if she had
Katya.
something to say.
Katya?
She might not be there.
Okay.
All right, let's.
Election committee? Tiffany?
Yeah, it's Tiffany Cessna. Niles, I think George is on too. Can
Yep,
you unmute him as well in case he wants to correct something I say or likely say it better than I do? So we just wanted to thank all of you, the council, for the opportunity to serve. We had a great team this year. George moved in March of last year and immediately answered the call for volunteers and was on a committee for the first time. Anna Meenan also joined. They were knowledgeable and perhaps even more importantly this year, eminently reasonable committee members. I was very thankful for them. The village charter calls for the council to appoint a minimum of 3 openly and fairly solicited qualified voter volunteers upon taking office. So, your July meeting is usually when the committees are appointed, and the committee is charged with managing the annual election while operating according to the rules and procedures adopted by the council. And we did that this year with record results. So just a few notes about this year's election. Of the 616 qualified voters on the Village of Martin Sedition's qualified voter roll, 424 ballot return envelopes were returned by the deadline and deemed valid by the committee. As briefly discussed earlier, only 4 were disqualified, 3 because they were unsigned, and 1 because it arrived in the village office mailbox with no envelope at all. The 424 ballots counted is a record for the village. It surpasses the 2015 record, in which a total of 393 ballots were counted. This represents an almost 70% qualified voter participation rate in this year's elections. That is also a record, and it's excellent turnout by any election standards. The schedule recommended early in the process by the committee and adopted by the council in open session was clear and provided sufficient time and instruction so that qualified voters who chose to participate were able to do so. We are also sure, seeing at least one candidate, a council member elect that's still on, their campaigning also helped turn out votes this year. The vendor reported approximately 50 ballots postmarked after the May 13 election day postmark date. Since they arrived by the received by deadline, they were considered for the election count. And we just wanted to highlight that. So for even people who chose to drop their ballots in the mail after the postmark by deadline, the system worked to ensure that their ballots were counted. So just congratulations to Andrew Cowders and Katie Filipczyk Howard. Their terms to begin on July 1, 2021 in accordance with the charter. We appreciate all of the candidates, in addition to Andrew and Katie, Alex Gesker, Marty Langland, Brian Oliver, and Larry Wasson, who all tossed their names into the hat for a chance to be elected, or the ring, whichever analogy you choose, to serve on our municipal government's 5-member council. The committee also wants to thank Niles, our manager, for the staff support of this year's election. He was not only responsible for the voter roll and the contract management, he worked with us to timely post a minimum of 1 per week email communication with voters for approximately 15 weeks straight. That was a lot of work, and we're thankful for the support. So considerations for next year's committee, a return to in-person voting. The vast majority of the comments received by the committee in open session, as well as in correspondence this year, supported a return to in-person voting. Voting in person has brought the village together for years. It's a cherished tradition, and routinely is one of the most highly attended events in the annual calendar. As one qualified voter this year said, there's nothing like a free glass of wine and an ice cream cone to improve neighborly civility. That said, about in-person voting, we offered that the past 2 years of all mail-in processes has informed the committee of a new way that the state mandated offering of absentee ballots, which is triggered by in-person voting, could be done in future elections. Future committees could use a vendor to handle the absentee process. And we understand, or we believe that would greatly alleviate what was perhaps some of the most labor-intensive work for prior committees. We also wanted to be clear that all mail-in voting is not a labor-free process. Both the committee and the staff had plenty of work to do this year. When any vendor is contracted for work, there's always plenty of work to be done. In fact, for the staff, an all mail-in process might actually mean more work because they're managing the contract, they're dealing with resident communications regarding their ballots, where are they in the process, that sort of thing. So hiring a vendor may just save some shoe leather for the committee in the future. And then just a conclusion with a few considerations for how the committee operated this year and what we would, folks might consider in the future. Communications with candidates. This year's committee did not respond to candidate questions individually, but rather provided responses to candidate questions to all candidates at the same time. We believe this ensured that everyone was operating with the same information throughout the process. Active communication with the village, particularly in any year where there's a new or relatively new procedure. This year highlighted how important it was for the committee to regularly communicate with the village, addressing any questions, being active in addressing anything that could cause miscommunication or misperception about the election or its procedures. The active communication practices can help alleviate some of the heartburn, if you will, by getting full and accurate information out there as soon as possible. And then lastly, the deadlines matter, and it is imperative that the committee and the staff use village systems of record and documented standard processes that may be objectively reviewed and audited. So, for example, the committee's use this year of the VMA elections@martinseditions.org email and the staff process for maintaining the qualified voter roll. Those things must be done in the documented standard processes that are accessible on systems of record. These are just common practices and are key to ensuring clear transparent and fair electoral processes. George, did I miss or misstate anything?
Nope, I think you covered everything.
So, council, that's it for us, unless you have any questions.
Arthur.
Thanks very much. I would just like to congratulate you all on what really has been a record-setting and I think uniquely transparent election. Just having the entire process, well, with perhaps a very small amount off-screen being conducted online, certainly qualifies as highly transparent. So thank you all for all of your hard work.
I want to note another record that was set during this election. Andrew Cowders received more votes than any other candidate in village history. Congratulations.
Yes, congrats.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that, are we finished now, I think, with committee and task force reports? So we are ready for Doug's building administrator report.
Yep, I'm asking Doug to unmute. There we go.
Yes, just a couple things. 3506 Bradley Lane, they have submitted a demolition and building permit application a while ago. The county still has not issued that building permit, so the project is still on hold, and we haven't heard from the applicant as to when it will go forward. At the 7220 Delfield Street, they submitted an application to demolish an existing house and rebuild a new house. The village issued the permits on May 17th. The existing house is still standing. No work has begun on that project yet. That should be occurring soon. And at 3515 Raymond Street, the applicants have submitted an application for a variance for adding an addition, an office at the back of the house, and also for the steps on the side of the house. That variance hearing will probably be occurring sometime in July. And 7200 Summit Avenue, again, that variance was approved in July 16th of 2020. That will expire in July 16th of this year, and as of today, the applicants have not submitted an application to the county or to the village.
They just to tack on.
Finally,
sorry, Doug. Just before you go there, just on 7200 Summit, they have asked for an extension of the variance. Was the latest email I got in conversation with Ron Bolt. It is the manager. It's up to the manager to decide. Their concern is in acquiring a contractor to do the work. So under the terms of the variance agreement, my thought was to extend the variance given their request. So I just wanted to put that to the council just so for their awareness. Thank you. Continue, Doug.
And finally, a while back, village sent another letter to the state regarding pedestrian safety along Brookville Road. We did receive a response, third response from the state. Unfortunately, they didn't address any of the safety issues that we asked them to implement at Bradley and Taylor. So again, we'll go back to the state and try to get more information from them on those safety issues. And that concludes my report.
Quick question, Ron, this is for you. As a next door neighbor to an owner who's requesting variance, am I required, should I recuse myself from that?
That's typically the process.
Okay. So if I speak to them about it, I will not be violating ex parte discussions if I'm not a voting member.
Well, I would probably still recommend that you refrain from speaking with them because there might be the appearance of ex parte because you are serving on the council and might have the opportunity to comment to other council members, even though you wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to add, just to Doug's report, on the other thing about the state and Brookville Road section. As I talked briefly about designs to improve Brookville Road. The state is also looking at And WSSC is also looking at doing work on Brookville Road as well in the coming year. And so Section 3 and myself have asked them to clarify their schedule to do those improvements as part of the process of getting our improvements, which we've been talking about for over a year, as part of the work they're doing. So it's trying to both get them to do what we have asked them to do, but also recognizing that they're doing things and trying to make all of these schedules work, which is one of those fun things with the state and with other jurisdictions. All right.
Oh, and let me just add,
Yeah.
in addition, I was just thinking about Arthur's question a little more. So if Arthur, you are recusing yourself and you wanted to then discuss the application with your neighbor as a neighbor because it impacts you personally, then that would be good. We can make sure that there was a firewall in place so that you don't communicate with the council members about what you heard.
Good. Okay. Thank you. That clarifies.
Okay, thank you, and thanks, Doug, for your report. Okay, so next up is the public hearing on the possible adoption of ordinance 2021-3-1 to adopt an urban forest program. We can start with discussion. Any resident comments on the urban forest program? Ordinance?
Well, Paula or Marty, or is Marty still around? I don't see her. Anyone else wants to comment? Let me just say this is what we could call plant a tree or pay a fee. And it puts the village into the consistency with what the county requires. We have, but what's the word? Not alienated ourselves, but
exempt ourselves.
Exempted ourselves from the county regulation. This would put us back consistent with the county, but would be administered by the village. So plant a tree or pay a fee, and the fee would be the same as the required now by the county for one tree. So very simple way of doing it.
Right.
Are there any resident comments?
Yeah.
Yes.
I see Susan. I see Marty and Susan's hand.
Okay.
Should I
Marty, go ahead. Go ahead. Yep, I saw yours first.
Okay. I think this is a good improvement in the ordinance. I think that it's still, and Arthur, thank you for doing it. I think it is a good thing to do. I support this change. I think it still, really undervalues the trees. I mean, a mature tree that like the one we lost there at Delfield and Taylor is worth like $40,000. And so the pay a fine of $750 is really more nominal than actually commensurate with the value of the trees that we're losing. And I'm very aware that the lot at 7220 Delfield was just clear cut, and we lost two beautiful big trees there. The loss of the tall canopy trees in Martin's Additions is a continuing concern because what the developers plant are not canopy trees in the sense of the 50 to 70 footers. And they wouldn't be, even if they had room to plant a big tree like that, they wouldn't have it for 50 years. So there is a real ongoing concern that I would like to have Arthur and all our tree lovers consider going forward. I think that this ordinance is good as far as it goes in the right direction. But the loss of a $40,000 tree and a $750 fine for that is really disproportionate, not sufficient. And there is no really powerful incentive to keep developers from clear cutting, even when they don't really have to. They clear cut for their convenience. It makes it easier to build a new house. And the issues that Josh Bowers has raised in the past about the stormwater catchment basins that they have to put on a lot when you build a new house make it almost impossible to have space to actually plant a tall canopy tree to replace the tall canopy that we've had. So I can only say that the open sky there from the deforestation, the clear cutting on 7220 Delfield really changed the character of the whole north end of the block of Delfield and Chestnut because it took out a chunk of tree canopy that is now discontinuous. And that has an impact on wildlife. It has an impact on cooling. It has, all the things that trees do. So I wish that there would be, I hope there will be in the future some way to provide much more meaningful incentives to keep the tall tree canopy that we are losing, because a couple more developers and we're going to have nothing left but little patchwork pieces of tall trees. I love the fact that we now have a right tree, right place policy where you don't plant tall trees under the power lines. I mean, that's an improvement, thank goodness for that. But that means that we've only got short trees going in, and it takes 50 years to grow the big trees that we're losing. So there's more work to be done here, I think, and I want to commend Arthur for his long time attention to these tree issues. And I think that there is a long-term issue here in Martin's Additions of losing our tall tree canopy, which historically has been incredibly valuable in terms of health and aesthetics and property values as well. So a continuing issue to be concerned about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Susan had her hand up.
Yeah,
Okay,
so hang on
Susan,
one
hold on.
second. You just switched around on my screen, so.
Did Katya have something to say first? I think she had.
I did not. I was just muted for a very long time, and I was trying to draw attention to myself to get unmuted.
Okay.
It worked.
It worked. Yes, it did.
I'm not sure about the specific ordinance, but this is just something that came up in my mind when I'm thinking about trees being planted on your lawn or in your yard. The question is, if there is an antenna put on a cell pole in front of a home, who controls the airspace between the antenna and the home if the telecom says that they feel that their transmission is interfered with by the tree, by the canopy, etc. I don't think it's clear yet. I mean, it does seem like utility companies trim back, prune stuff for their wires to go. And if the telecom says, we need this because of our signal, we need a clearer path, we would like you to trim that tree back, that can be an issue for trees. So I think that's something worth looking at, is who controls the space. And my understanding is that about 85% or more of the poles in our county are PEPCO utility poles. And that's one of the biggest issues on enforcement in the county, is that the county says we do not have authority to regulate PEPCO utility poles. And that's where they put a lot of these antennas. So if that's the case, and there ends up being a conflict between the municipality, we don't want you to cut back the tree stuff, and the telecom, well, if the ZTA were to pass, it's basically written into the ZTA, you don't have any say over anything that happens 30 feet from a home if there's an antenna put there. So it could look dire for the trees in the path, and so I just kind of want to mention that. But otherwise, yeah, no. Just a general question.
I see Paula has her hand up.
Yeah. I asked you to unmute. Okay, good.
I did. Thank you. So I wanted, to echo what Marty had to say about the tree ordinance. And if we put this ordinance into perspective, into some perspective about what's going on in neighboring communities. So in the District of Columbia, Arlington County, the rest of Montgomery County, this is a baby step for us, and it's a very important baby step for us, because at this juncture, in terms of our environmental history, in terms of our conservation history, every little bit is going to help. So, our canopy is not only at risk, but, there are other factors that, that go into consideration as well. So I commend Arthur and his genius for building in the stormwater clause into the tree ordinance. And I think that, as Marty said, it's hard to replace a tree that is valued at $40,000 with a $750 fee for tree removal, but it gets people's attention, and I think that's I think that's the direction we need to head into, especially given where other municipalities and our neighbors are headed.
Thanks, Paula. Does anyone else have a comment? No. If not, would the council like to vote on this proposed ordinance, vote to adopt it tonight?
Yes. I will move to adopt the ordinance number 2021-3-1 to adopt an urban forest program.
Do we have a second?
Yeah. Todd seconded. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so
Yeah.
Ordinance does not specify the amount of the environmental impact fee. The village maintains a schedule of permit fees that is amended from time to time by resolution, so that you don't need an ordinance every time a fee amount is changed. So the council could also introduce tonight a resolution to amend the permit fee schedule
Right.
to impose the fee. And you can discuss whether $750 is the right number. It's my understanding that at the county level, it's $250 per tree. You've got to plant 3. Or in some instances, you may decide I have room for 1, so I'm going to pay $500 or 2.
So my original formulation was something of a compromise between that, requiring planting 1 tree rather than 3. But then if you don't plant any, have the fee be $750. As you say, the county is, if you plant 1, it's $250 for each tree you don't plant.
Right.
So in this case, it would be $750 for 1 tree that you don't plant. But that we could be up for discussion. I wanted to make it simpler by only requiring 1 tree, but then imposing a higher cost on that if you don't. Kind of make it easy. Make it as easy as possible for the builder to plant just 1 tree, but then imposing something of an incentive to do it by having the full $750 fee. But that's up for discussion right now.
I just had one quick comment, and I want to thank Arthur, but I also want to thank all members of the council for supporting this. I think it's an important piece, and as Susan Kahn mentioned, I think it's a nice stepping stone. My very quick innocuous comment, which is not a surprise to everyone, it's not meant to be a monkey wrench or a deterrent, but I'm just saying that I'm going to abstain from the vote, and it's simply on principle around the idea of going forward with ordinances. I'd like to see that we have a standalone period for public commenting. And again, I know that I've stood by some ordinances that I haven't stood behind. This happens to be one that I'm in favor of, but I don't want to pick favorites. I just want to be consistent. So I'm hoping that, with the new council, we'll take this under consideration to have those standalone discussions. But Arthur and the council, I just want to say I thank you. I really am in favor of this on content. So thanks.
It's a question. What do we have to Ron's comment about, what do we have to do to create flexibility for us to modify the fee schedule without having to open up everything?
That process is already in place because you do have a permit fee schedule. It already exists. So tonight you could introduce resolution 2021-6-1 to amend the fee schedule, and the fee schedule would be amended by adding at the bottom urban forest program, environmental impact fee, and then the fee amount. And that resolution would be introduced tonight and then adopted at the next meeting. And you just need to decide tonight what that amount should be. For the introduction, which...
So I propose introducing a resolution to add this to the fee schedule of $750, unless anybody has any discussion, objection, anything to add.
Oh, wait, I need to be clear though. So if we're going in with 750, is the thought, we're not tied to that. We can then modify.
That can be changed in the future.
Yes. You can even change it next month before it's adopted.
Okay, I support your move.
Yeah.
So I'll second that.
Okay, so nobody wants to see me and Ray's
Right.
Not raised at this point, maybe next month.
So I support as well the resolution.
Okay. So, are we all in favor? At least 4 of us are. Are you abstaining, Jeff, or are you?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you all.
So,
moving on.
Done.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. Great work. Okay, so next we have the public hearing and possible adoption of ordinance 2021-4-1 to amend the Code of Ordinances to clarify the front-loading garage restrictions. Do we have comments on this? Okay, are we ready to vote? Okay, so would someone like to?
So this has already been proposed, right? We are at the final stage.
Yes.
Of that.
Yeah.
For the record, should we just describe what it is?
Sure.
Ron, would you like to describe it?
Sure. So this ordinance would clarify that the front-loading garage door width limitation and number limitation applies to both front yards of a corner lot. That's how it was intended to apply when it was drafted years ago, but a recent building permit project brought to light that the existing language is susceptible of multiple interpretations. And so, this language would clarify and remove the potential ambiguity by just stating corner lots are subject to these restrictions with respect to all street frontages.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
Because right now, the code provides that there can only be one front-loading garage, and the door of which cannot exceed 10 feet.
All right.
Okay, do we have any further comments? Council comments? Okay.
I just had one comment, and I just want to put out there because I know there had been some opposition to this expressed by some residents. I don't think they're on tonight's call, but I just want to say that with that opposition, it had me thinking, and again, I'm not here to sway the other council members because I think I know how they are probably going to vote, but when I was hearing the opposition, it made me think, the idea of owning personal property is obviously something that we want to consider carefully. And I appreciate the original intent, but then we had this exception, I guess. So it made me think, I'm not sure, quite frankly, by heart, how many corner lots we have, but I'm certain it's not that many. And I was wondering, I was thinking it could be one of those things that perhaps you need a variance or a permit, and so that you would leave it perhaps on a case-by-case basis. So that way you would give as much discretion to the property owner, but recognizing that the council, if this was going to materially affect the neighborhood, or let's say all the neighbors opposed, then clearly I think you'd go one way. But what happens if the person who or the developer goes around and all the neighbors concur and everyone is supportive of what they're doing? I think that it could be where it could be flexible. So I just put that out there. That was some of the thinking I had when there was some strong opposition to it. But, again.
Well, I think with the variances that we've had, the majority of them, not entirely, but the majority have been associated with corner lots, mostly because of setback requirements. And when these have come up, they've asked for variances, and often they've been accepted, but not always. So there is a variance process. So if somebody had sought a variance, we would have heard it. In this case, it wasn't sought, and it went ahead anyway. But I think that if somebody wanted a variance on a corner lot, they can always seek it, and have in the past.
And of course,
that's by definition. Right? Like this, we're not breaking the way that we are dealing with building permits.
Right.
Right. It's consistent with past practice.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay, so are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All.
It's been submitted, seconded. Okay.
And all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Or opposed?
I am going to be my abstaining again. I felt that we should have had a time for having a standalone public discussion on this, but I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next, Arthur, financial matters.
Okay, the financial matter. I want to spend a moment, as I did in the report, to mention that we're doing something a little different this year. Normally, at this time of the year, we go through the budget to see what budget items have been overspent, what underspent, and make adjustments. And we do, in the past, we've done that for every single budget item, and I counted it up. There are about 37 to 40 separate budget items, and we would go through them line by line and make choices about what was going to be running over or under. Subsequent discussions that Niles has had with our accountant and then with Ron, our attorney, suggested that we do not have to go into that amount of detail. The ordinance, in fact, that requires it is rather vague. It says, no expenditure may be made unless funds, therefore, have been properly appropriated. And so that doesn't say item by item, budget item by budget item for the budget as a whole. And the interpretation, apparently, an appropriate interpretation could be there are broad budget items, 7 of them, not the 37. And as long as each of those 7 broad ones were in surplus, we were fine. We didn't have to have a budget amendment. And it turns out that of the 7 big broad categories, they're all in surplus. And so for this year, we do not need any budget amendments, which is nice to hear because it's just a pain in the neck to go through them one by one. And I used an example from the current budget, from the current item, that tree maintenance, we've been underspending, whereas, we've been overspending in tree maintenance and underspending in tree replacements, but they are all under one broader item. And so, some of this happens just because the way vendors send in their bills and how they allocate the expenses. So this year, I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the council and to the public that we are somewhat changing our budget amendment process, and we don't need any this year. That's it.
Okay, but Arthur, just to clarify, we're still going to have that same level of specificity overall in our number of line items, et cetera, but it's just as far as the budget amendments are required as for the bigger, broader.
For the bigger, broader, the 7 broad items, and not the 37 narrow.
Right, exactly. Right. It is really great to have that level of transparency and specificity in the line items. Okay, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that and to clarify, the other reason the accountant talked about this is so that when we're setting budget priorities for the next year, we're looking at what we actually spent in those specific line items from the year before. And so when we were doing budget amendments by line item, it could, you're sort of just shifting around money, whereas this sees us, okay, we spent this much so we can adjust it for the next year. It allows for some cleaner budget processes from an accounting point of view. So that's the other part related to this. Okay?
Oh, somebody's not muted there.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, good. So I think we just have to adopt this and we're done.
There's nothing to adopt.
Nothing to adopt, nothing to approve. Okay, fine. Moving on.
All good. So next it's Niles' report.
Right. So we've talked about most of what, just through the course of the meeting, we've talked about most of what I was going to talk about. So we talked about the survey. Obviously, you heard from Mark what we're doing there, and I'm in the process of uploading that to Constant Contact, making sure that all looks good, and we'll do that. The events, the 4th of July event, as I talked about earlier, we're in the process of finalizing all the fine details. I'm going to spend some time looking at our our tents that we have in storage to make sure that they're usable, that kind of stuff, all the little nitty-gritty to make sure that the event is a success. We also, just as a couple of smaller things that we had the Shred event. The Shred event went incredibly well. As it turned out, we ended up having 225 what they designate as units of what the vendor designated as units of shredding. I think that's per square pound or something like that. They have some metric for it, but 225. And it seemed like it went very well. We didn't have a truck breakdown like happened last year, so that went very well. And then we also did a volunteer appreciation reception on Sunday for the current volunteers and so on. And so that went very well at La Ferme and was very well received. I talked about the American Rescue Plan funds a little bit earlier. As I said, I've sort of in details about that. And Arthur and I will discuss that more tomorrow so that we can meet the deadline, the June 30th deadline. And then the RFP for the waste and recycling. We received one bid, which was from Waste Management, and they came back with a slight adjustment up. It's from around 130 to 134 for the coming year, 134,000, I should say. They did ask, one of the things that they modified was how they wanted to treat bulk trash. So in the past, they haven't, in our past discussions, they haven't had weight limits or number of pieces you can put out for bulk trash and stuff. They want to institute that. Some of that is for workers' comp reasons about how much the employees can lift and other concerns that they have with bulk trash. My recommendation is that we go forward and negotiate. Ron and I can negotiate with Waste Management on this and sort of the details. I heard feedback from one resident who had some good things to say about sort of the details of the contract. Nothing major, nothing different than what we're doing, but just making the language a little bit more clear about what we're asking from them based on his. Yes.
Before you move on from that, if you don't mind if I jump in.
No, go ahead.
I would recommend that we negotiate the line item that says that residents are limited to the number of items that can be picked up at bulk trash. I think that would be an incredibly difficult thing to manage.
Yes.
And without a reduction in price, not everybody uses it every time, but when they choose to use it, I don't think we should be limiting residents in the number.
So is it, I'm not sure from a budgeting, negotiating, or budgeting writing point of view, could you write in that portion of it as some kind of a cost, by cost or pounds or truckloads or something like that? So that could be variable depending on what is picked up?
Yeah. I think we can discuss that. I had a preliminary conversation with them on last Friday, I believe, where I just wanted to get a sense of them, and they said, we can sort of discuss that stuff with them. I think we can look at maybe a different metric. I think Katya's point about people using it differently, right? I think does question how we might be able to either negotiate with them or discuss that in more strict terms.
I also agree with what Katya was saying, is that that puts the burden on the residents to let me see them at 5. I mean, you feel like you're in the light checkout lane at the grocery store that
6 items or less
cheating on anyway. But as I read it, it was not just number of items. But I don't know how the hell we're going to, anticipate how residents are going to figure out weight, whether something's too heavy or not. Let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
Finish the weight, and I thought that there was also measuring that was going on. And so, I don't see that as really a cost. That didn't seem to me, I mean, increasing the price from 130 to 134 and seems fairly inflation sensitive and all that. I don't have a problem with that. What I think they were responding to was concerns over the safety or the health of their folks who are picking that up. And maybe there's a different way to approach that. And that would be how I would look at that. But for them to just say, here's the limits, just doesn't feel right without looking for an alternative there.
Right. And so what I would say to give you a little bit more of a background. I mean, already, people have asked about heavy items, and said, hey, I have this thing, it's pretty heavy, will they take it? And in the past, we've had those discussions with them. And so I think, in terms of how strictly they enforce their rules, I think one of the things we could, residents have asked is doing it sort of on the length thing, like if it's longer than 5 feet, right, which is one of the dimensions, that's a different safety hazard in the sense of it sticking out the back of their truck and what can fit in it. But I think to your point, I think having a discussion about how we can make these limitations or how we can discuss these limitations in a way that is practical with them and communicable to, that's the wrong word, but sort of, the ability to communicate with the residents about it in a way that makes sense, I think is a really good discussion to have. And that's why I think my recommendation was for Ron and I to talk to them about it and sort of enter it that way.
And the one other thought I had, and this may have surfaced at our La Ferme thing on Sunday, is maybe is there a separate group that would just do really heavy stuff? That could pick, handle the sofas or whatever else that people are deciding to throw out. Maybe that's a separate thing, and I don't know how you tell people what's heavy or not, but that, just as a thought.
So I can address that sort of from a different angle. In the city of Gaithersburg, where I live, they only do bulk trash on demand. So you have to call them, and they say, this is how heavy it is, this is how big it is, this is what we do, and then they have the crew that picks up specifically those items, right? So the thought might be, if the village wants to entertain something like that, is to find a service that could do that on-demand type of work, whether it be less regular, so it would be as residents need it, or something like that. Like, that's another approach, and I'm just putting that out as something that I'm aware of.
I do like the idea of I appreciate the on-demand part, but I do like the idea of having a schedule, because it forces me to say, okay, now is the day now I can get to that. I won't be prompted to do it if I have to do it on demand. So anyway, just a thought there.
I think that with the amount of cardboard boxes that we all have with the internet shopping these days, that just comes into play that much more, right? I know that in my house we unload a tremendous amount of boxes on bulk trash day.
Right.
That just too big or whatever. I don't know.
No, that's again, all these I think are practical things. I think it's a question of how can we have that discussion with waste management, and that's where I'd like to kind of take this to have something in place, but to also, with them, the agreement with them to continue, but also discuss specifically how we deal with bulk trash.
So my own feeling on this, and of course, I want to hear from the rest of the council too. I'd like to see that 6-item limit to be thrown out altogether. Like, I don't want to discuss that, right?
Okay.
It's not reasonable. The other items in terms of worker comp concerns that they're claiming for weight and length, I can see that maybe we can find a reasonable compromise there. Please don't negotiate the number of items.
Right.
Excuse me.
No.
Go ahead, Katya.
I had a second point on this, but it wasn't related to this particular thing, but it also related to waste management. So, Susan, if you still wanted to discuss the
with regard to the number of items, I would say it's very rare that there are more than a few households that really participate in heavy trash pickup. So if they look at the overall number of items per neighborhood, it's probably not that many. And maybe that would be a point to emphasize in the negotiation, is that,
certainly
maybe 2 per household if you look at the overall village.
So my second question was that in the last several yearly surveys of residents, residents have expressed an interest in picking up recycling more than once a week, again, because of those boxes. Have we gotten anywhere there?
So we haven't gotten anywhere there. In fact, I had put in the RFP that they could bid twice a week or once a week on that. and Waste Management chose not to provide data on. If you can see in their bid, which I submitted to the council, they clearly say that it's only for once a week recycling. So they were, even when I was trying to gather data on this, they were very resident to give me data on more than once a week recycling.
Resistant?
And then, yeah, resistant. Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Resistant to, and very very much not wanting to give more than that. So I think it's one of those questions of, we can go back to them and ask them again. I'm more than willing to ask them, will you provide a number for what it would cost to do it twice a week, and then compare it. The estimate that they said is that recycling is about 20% of our bill, which is about $2,400 a month, right? So if you think about it, it would be about a 20% increase to do recycling again, based on that one number. But they specifically did not want to bid on doing it twice a week. So
that's something that residents may want to consider, that 20% increase, and may be willing to eat because we have such a surplus in the budget. Certainly something for the next council to figure out. I would just recommend that if they're really, truly resistant to picking up recycling more than once a week, that we actually seek out other contractors so that they can feel like they're not the only players in the market, and we're not cornered with services that we want and don't get.
And that is something to go to directly what I want to do. I think you're right. And one of the things so I am at the end of the month going to the MML conference. And one of the things that I'm going to directly want to talk to is the vendors there. I do know from looking at the historical record and sort of the sense that I got from various vendors that one of the big things that prevents vendors from bidding on our contract is the side or rear pickup of trash.
But that's not related to recycling.
Right.
So
no,
maybe recycling could be a separate contract.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm not saying. I'm saying I'm going to the question. Sorry, I don't mean to be. My point was about having more than one vendor. Do you see what I'm saying? And having more than one respondent. So I think to your point, having a separate recycling contract, I think is one way we could divide it up. We could definitely do that and seek to do it that way. That's why I want to have the conversations at the conference with other vendors to try to get a sense of the marketplace on that issue. And so this is something throughout the process that I was trying to find ways of trying to get people to tell me this information and sort of go on from there. So sorry, I didn't mean to confuse the two things for you.
No, but you could also drop it in your to conversations with Waste Management that if they're not willing to provide us a quote for 2 days a week, then they may lose that altogether.
Right. No, totally. I think we can sort of go that way.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
And then I'm trying to think that.
Tiffany has her hand up.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Just on the waste management stuff, Niles, I don't know if it's still part of the contract or something you can talk to them about in the future. When we have had advance notice of larger items in the past, Waste Management sent a larger truck with one of the mechanical arms.
Yes.
And I don't know where that fits into what you guys are doing now, but it's either they're dropping their capacity to provide the service, but the workers' compensation stuff to me seems like they had a different answer for that in the past by using a different vehicle with a hydraulic arm.
And we've talked about this before. I mean, that discussion has happened, and I've had that with them, and I've had to push them because our current contract doesn't give a limit on weight and doesn't give a limit on these type of things, to give us that bigger truck to do that kind of stuff when they receive certain items. And it seems like their approach to that as a company is trying to move away from doing those type of things. And I think this gets into the marketplace question, right? What can we do to make our bid as strong as it is, both in terms of whether it's dividing these services up and get different people to do different things. I mean, for a while, the Shirazi was using both Waste Management and Republic to do two different things. And then Republic has now taken over for them. And so I think having that discussion with them on, you've done this, you've done that, it seems like there's been a some kind of philosophy change in what they're willing to accept around bulk trash, and we have to figure out a new strategy potentially in bidding these things. And I think that's something to consider, and that's what I learned through this process and doing this bid for the first time as well.
And just one last item to consider for the incoming council, because you weren't here during the last negotiation of the pricing. Last time we signed a new contract with Waste Management, the increase in price was very significant that they requested and we proceeded with. So although they're not increasing their price much this time, it used to be something like 80 or 90,000 and now it's 145.
Remember that. When was that, Katya? When did we last have our last negotiation?
I can answer that question unless you want to.
I don't remember, so please.
It's 2018. It's 2018. So and that was that contract that was worked out, and that's and that was a lot of what I relied on looking back at the historic record, is how they did it in 2018. A lot of the RFP came from that. So, but also looking at those discussions. So. And we try. I mean, this time, I sent out emails directly to maybe 24 vendors through the state procurement site and things like that. So we tried to get it in as many people's hands as possible. All right.
Awesome. I don't have a comment on this particular issue, but I just wanted to say a quick mention on something else, Niles. And again, I want to thank Niles and other members of the council, and particularly Susan, for pulling together in very short fashion a wonderful reception for our committee and volunteers. And unfortunately I wasn't there, I had another commitment, but again I heard it went well, and again kudos for pulling that off. The only innocuous point I wanted to make was there are other residents in the community I think that are out there that also deserve some sort of recognition. I'll give an example. There were a number of Boy Scout and Girl Scouts who helped with shoveling during the snow. There are others that we know that do some fundraising for charitable causes. So I just put that out for the next council. I'm not exactly sure how that fits. Does it fit into a reception like that? I know there's also been talk about the newsletter. We could beef that up and maybe do like a news article, but I just want to put out, I think there are other residents also that deserve some recognition, and for us as under the new council to think about how we would make that happen, because I think it's just a nice community building thing, and it'd be great to pull them into the fold as well. Over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next up, additional resident comments on topics not already discussed.
Yep.
Okay.
There's Susan Kahn.
I think this was sideways discussed, but not like whole frontal discussed. First, I think it's a really good idea to have exit interviews, and I don't remember if I already mentioned this at another meeting, but as people leave and they have developed expertise and knowledge and experience, if it could be captured in some way, council members and others. To that point, a couple of years ago, Emily Shetty, a delegate to Maryland, said that she could help she would be willing and happy to help us do stuff on Brookville Road related to pedestrian and car safety. And I had told the previous manager, and I don't know if that ever got to the news. And that was just a small thing I was going to say, but I had something else to say too.
Oh, no, sorry. I can answer that question. So yes, I have some of that information, and I think that is the next thing that I want to do. One of the things is working. We've been working through our contacts with SHA and with our other municipalities, but I think looking at it from the delegate angle as well, I think Delegate Carr as well had expressed concern at one point, I think. So I think that's another avenue that we can bring in as well, especially as was discussed in the call with the state today, with their projects regarding the American Rescue Plan funds. There's $500 million of the 3-something billion that they were allocated that are going to SHA. Obviously, all of the state wants to do something with that money, but putting us, in a position to put Brookville Road on that list, I think, is something that we can definitely look at and was discussed during that call. So,
and the two specific places I was thinking of, which I think Doug Lohmeyer may have already talked about, Brookville and Bradley, but having a crossing there, a crosswalk and stop signs, I think is just so important in terms of sight lines, also having it open. And I mentioned that intersection in particular, as well as as well as Cummings and Brookville, because those are two intersections that have a lot of space, and that if this ZTA passes, they would be prime real estate to put a cell pole and an equipment cabinet. And it would be just disastrous in terms of sight lines for cars and pedestrian safety at those corners. So I'm hoping we'll move forward. I know it's complicated because of working with Section 3 and such, but the sooner we can get something in the works, I think that'd be really good. And regarding the corner of Cummings and Brookville, I know that people, it makes my heart go out that people, when I just look at that corner, I love it because I know people have spent so much care, and there's like love that's gone into the plantings, and I think it might even say something about Richard Krajcek or someone before.
The bench is dedicated, to Richard.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, that was when a few years ago when we were talking about what locations are 60 feet away from a home where you could put a cell tower. That was with the previous CTA. Now it's 30 feet. But that is a classic place that's an open space that any considerations that this community has about, we have emotional connection to this space. We spent energy and time, and it memorializes someone, and there's aesthetics, and there's, caring, and there's, whatever other issues you care about. The way this is currently written, it might be useful to check with the county on, well, you don't even have to check, but if you do check with the county, I can tell you from my communications with county zoning people about this ZTA and what's in it, they can tell you that, you're going to have some say. You're a municipality. You'll have some say. We control certain things, but you all control other things. There's a lot of double talk there. And I can tell you from, I mediate cases of conflict with homeowners associations and in district court in our county. And whenever I sit through a trial where something doesn't work out in mediation, I'm just kind of curious how the judge is going to rule on it, especially small claims cases, but other ones too, and neighbor disputes, animal control. There's always, or especially small claims, it's what's written down is what matters. It doesn't matter that someone assured you from the county that you would have some input. You've got to look at the ZTA, you've got to look at the text, and just without question, these are limited use poles, 30 feet from homes, no resident input, no public hearing, no notification to municipality. So whatever, everyone has this, and it's going to break my heart. I know these cases are going to come up, but it really just doesn't matter that no one will really care what your background is about that corner, and that there's a nice little bench there and there's a lovely little garden. If this sort of thing passes, it will not matter. And so basically what's happening is we will be writing away, and it will be in the text, that we will not have input on right-of-way areas like that. And so I just want to mention that if that does matter to you, make sure to get out there, get out in front, and don't just listen to the one or two county people who are saying assuring things. Make sure that you're looking with and spending some of that, the wonderful saved money that we have as a municipality on attorneys with background in these protective ordinances, and seeing what we can do and what we could say to the county to try to get them to not pass that, and et cetera. And what you could do on the municipality level to protect yourselves. But you can just be assured that if it passes, you're going to have far fewer options. So I just want to encourage you to get out in front on that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That prompted a thought about an earlier comment from Mark Schaefer, about which I think indicated that there was some uncertainty as to whether the council had actually approved that all recommendations from the walkability survey, which he rightly cited as extremely efficient and productive, whether the council had approved that those measures be implemented going forward, and we did. Just so that everyone knows that, and we're investigating what steps can be taken in terms of implementing the recommendations for the prototype streets.
Can I just go back just to address Susan's specific question about Bradley and Brookville and what Doug had mentioned, is that we specifically asked them about a crosswalk and stop signs and all of those things in our letter to them. So I just wanted to say what you were talking about is what we've asked the state to do. And I just wanted to make that clear, just because you'd asked specifically about that intersection. And then the other one that we specifically talked about was Taylor and Brookville. But I think looking at Cummings and Brookville and Shepherd and Brookville, and some relation to walkability, but also other things like drainage, which is something that Section 3 and Section 5 have been concerned about, or Section 3, has been concerned about as well. So I just wanted to sort of just knock off all of those little things in terms of what we had asked the state for. All right.
Thanks, Niles. This is Jeff. I just want to jump in real quick. Susan Kahn, you know how I feel about you. You're an amazing advocate on many levels for many things, and the 5G issue in particular. My quick thought and comment, and I know, Arthur, you've heard me on the safety task force also kind of hint at this. Because of this sense of time urgency, I just wanted to see, and I know, Ron, you're on here, maybe it's a council motion, but I wanted to see whether it's Arthur or Arthur and myself, whatever it might be, but perhaps we could work with Ron to really just do some snooping for us to understand where this is heading, so that we're a little bit on top of this. And if we do need to write something, again, that would be a vote most likely under the new council, but at least could we start the process working with Ron to understand where this is heading, what the timeline is, and how we could effectuate a response if we decide to do that. Arthur, I'm not sure if you had any input on that, but I just wanted to, again, innocuous kind of fact-finding, and Ron, you may have some thoughts on this, but again, because of the time sensitivity, I don't think this is something we can just sit back on. We should at least do some digging.
Yeah, in fact, Brad, Susan had mentioned that she has a briefing that she could do. Perhaps we could do it, a small one, we're not a quorum, to get educated, and then Ron, whatever you've learned on the subject would be very helpful as well. But we don't have to do it now, it's getting late.
Yeah.
Just quickly mention, I did attend a meeting with Councilmember Friedson and raised some concerns that the town of Chevy Chase and the town of Somerset had, and it's my sense that the ZTA will probably be adopted next month, but there is a opportunity to get in front of the county executive to seek edits to the Code of Montgomery County Regulations, which implement the ZTA. The county regulations are very outdated. They were drafted in the 90s, and I think they were last amended in 2003. And they set forth the procedure for the county to review deployment applications, but those procedures are based on old technology. And so, I've highlighted some areas where those regulations should be amended, especially with respect to what notice is given to the municipality and what participation the municipality can undertake in the county process.
Okay. Perhaps we can schedule some offline meetings in the village office or somewhere with just two of us with Susan at one time and Ron at another to go over it so we can get educated on it. Right now, I read that the proposed ordinance and didn't quite know what I was reading. So I think some education here would be useful.
All right.
Thank you for taking that on, Arthur.
Okay, so do we have any further comments on?
I see Marty's hand.
Yeah, let's let. Yeah. She had her hand up for a while.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate you all paying serious attention to this 5G ZTA 1907, because I think it's a very serious infringement of our community rights and our, public. I mean, it's just, this is dead serious. So thank you. The time limit here is worrying me. There's a letter that some municipalities have signed. I would like to ask the council to move quickly to sign that before they have their next work session in early July at the county council level. We can at least sign off on an existing letter that other municipalities have done. I also want to circle back and to a question earlier about Niles. Would you put information in the weekly wrap-up about how village residents can weigh in on this, because people are getting very concerned about it. As folks said at the safety meeting, it was the biggest hot topic on the safety issues, these 5G towers and the big boxes. Susan, your point about the boxes blocking vision on Brookville Road is incredibly important. Brookville Road is already dangerous enough. Having the 5G boxes on our corners there will make it even worse. And Ron, I want to thank you for your suggestion about changing the county code to actually give the municipalities some authority here, because I think it's critical that Martin's Additions and all the little villages have the authority to say no to these telecom companies, which right now we have zero authority. Susan Kahn is exactly right. They could put a box in the middle of the street and we would not be able to say no to it. And they could cut down trees. They could do all kinds of things. So this ZTA 1907 gives all the authority and power to the telecom companies. It gives none to the municipalities. And I think that Arthur, if you would follow up, and Jeff, all of you, and the new council as soon as possible, because that avenue of going through the county executive to change the county code so that the municipalities have the authority to block this, or at least to strictly control where those boxes are put. I think that's essential. It's a public safety issue. It's not just a property values aesthetics issue. It's a huge issue, and the boxes going in on Brookville Road would be a public safety disaster. So, again, Ron, thank you for that. I think we need to pursue that. And Niles, would you please put this information in the weekly wrap-up with the county executive's email and the county council emails so that residents know who to talk to about it, because people are really concerned, and rightly so. So thank you, because we need to really address this. And Susan, I want to thank you for your expertise. I would love to see your presentation too. I appreciate it so much.
Sorry, Marty.
Go ahead.
Susan, may I just make one quick point that might be useful for incoming council members and village residents to know. So federal law provides that the FCC can preempt local law with respect to the regulation of telecommunications. However, the 2018 FCC order expressly says we do have the authority to impose regulations with respect to the placement, construction, aesthetics, and the like, but we have to have standards that are written and published in advance. And so the village council did adopt an ordinance in chapter 10 of the code imposing some requirements on these deployments. So the village is currently not without any ability to regulate. We do have a code in place. It was adopted rather quickly because the FCC had imposed a deadline for municipalities to get their regulations in place. And so when the village council adopted this chapter 10, village council did so knowing that we'd have to revisit it one day and make sure that the technical standards that have been adopted are sufficient. At the time this code was adopted, there was litigation pending in many different courts, and we weren't sure yet what the county was going to do with respect to zoning and whether the industry would be successful in lobbying the state to pass a state law preempting municipal regulations. The state has not done that. So the village ordinance is in effect. But in addition to looking at the county's ETA, the incoming council will probably want to take a look at Chapter 10 and make sure that it's adequate as well.
Thank you, Ron. That's important to strengthen that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I mention one thing?
One thing.
Well, you know me, it's hard. One thing, Arthur. It's precisely that our we do not have zoning authority. Gaithersburg and Rockville are the only municipalities in Montgomery County that have zoning authority. So if they say that there's a 30-foot setback, that anything 30 feet and more is limited use, that means that anything 30 feet and more that's put in, all of the things that we've said about it can't be here, it can be there, or whatever we want, it doesn't pertain because we do not have zoning authority, right? Isn't that true? We do not have zoning authority. And let me just say that.
Wait, let Ron answer.
Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We don't have zoning authority, but we do have the authority to impose aesthetic requirements, which in my opinion includes avoiding clutter with respect to placement. So even if the county says, for example, these are allowed as a matter of zoning, we do have concurrent jurisdiction to impose standards that the FCC, federal government, has said we can impose.
Okay, well, I just wanted...
This was reviewed by Telecommunications Council, but I would encourage the village to consider having it looked at again by another Telecommunications Council.
I would
might be
I want to
so there might be an opportunity to share in the cost.
Yeah, because that's true. Also, if you can put something in at 30 feet away, and it's written in, it is in writing, and I know how much judges in our county care about what's in writing, and it says there's no resident notification, no public hearing, no et cetera, no et cetera. I don't quite see where you're going to have the opportunity to have the input. I know that I know that a council member's letters back to a Montgomery County council member's letters back to council members in at least 3 jurisdictions that I've read include 2 completely false statements. One is that the FCC small cell thing that passed in, 2018 or something, compels them to do these sorts of this ZTA that will allow that 30 feet, a 30-foot setback without kind of input. And it's simply not true. It does not compel them to do that. There was nothing in the small cell ordinance that ever said it needed to be as close as 30 feet. Secondly, it says that the Ninth Circuit ruling somehow compels them to do blah, blah, blah. We're not even in the Ninth Circuit. So I think that there are things being written by Montgomery County Council that have made people think, oh, everything's going to be okay. We can't do much. Our hands are tied. I'll tell you whose hands will be tied if this thing passes, and that will be any municipality that tries to have input on these. And I think that we need better. I think we need more telecom council. There's just hands down, it's expensive as heck. And I know Ron, that you've already talked to Mark Del Bianco in the past, and we know that I've had presentations with him. I'm also aware that you all go to these conferences with MML, and Crown Castle gives people tours of what residential, what cell towers look like in Ocean City and at the tops of buildings in Baltimore and and stadiums. What you need to start doing is looking, our council and our, you all need to look at what is it like in Montgomery County for these cell towers that go into homes, put in the wrong locations, wrong heights, etc. That there's no oversight, nothing ever happens. They are incapable of fixing the wrongs as it is. So we're about to, allow that system to be multiplied, in order of magnitude, et cetera, around the county. So I'm just really concerned about it. Good luck. I know hopefully it'll all go okay, but I think it's really wrong to listen to their
4 times this has come up in the past, 4 times this ZTA. Each time it was opposed successfully by residents. Each time it was said, this is a slam dunk. We were told it was going to be a slam dunk 2 years ago. Train left the station. Where, you're not going to be able to stop this. And we did. It did. So I think that municipalities can have an input. But if you don't, that's no skin off, it's up to us.
Susan, we heard you.
But your rights of way will be given away. Okay, it's on you. It's on you. And I'm kind of tired as a resident of having to take the load of having to bring it up again and again when I feel like putting your head in the sand about this has not helped us. It's gotten us behind. And I'm just hoping that we'll play catch up now instead of just listening to this kind of refrain from our attorneys, from our council members who go to meetings with Friedson that nothing can change. It's a done deal. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, do we have any resident comments?
Well, wait, before we just move on and dismiss Susan, I just want to say, what's the concrete action? So my understanding is, Arthur,
we will get together with Susan and with Ron.
Susan, Con, and Ron.
Well, not necessarily at the same time, unless that's productive. I'm not sure.
Okay, and then we'll determine if we will be bringing in, it sounds like we will, perhaps other council that specializes in this area. And then one other thing, and again, it's probably under the new council, is I think this is important enough where we'll probably have a public forum once we have information in place that we can share it with everyone and have a discussion. But
we need to have solid information.
Yes.
And we will. And hopefully we'll have that within a few weeks because this is moving very quick. Thanks. Over.
Okay, do we have any other resident comments on any subject that they have not specifically addressed tonight? And if not, I think we're ready to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Susan, sorry. Niles just let me in. I'll be very brief. It's Tiffany Cisna, Bradley Lane. Just on the tree ordinance, Arthur, I wanted to note for the record, you guys have talked about this in about 10 meetings this past year. So it's been discussed in 10 public meetings. I think that's great, and I'm glad that you took action on it to conclude. At some point in time, the council has to take action. That's what we ask you guys to do. Also, on committee solicitation, I went back, just skimmed my emails. I knew I had filled it out, but I found the original solicitation for last year that went to all residents from July 2nd, and then a follow-up and subsequent wrap-ups. And then the last thing on thanking others for their service to things that are outside of Martin's Additions. I would just call your attention to, there's a great piece in minutes from 2011 that are on the website. And Mike Zielinski talks about the thanking of others as well as the financial support of others and the community's history on that. So that's it. Thank you very much for the time.
Good.
Thank you. And Tiffany, what minutes were those mentioned in? Or Mike Zielinski's comments in 2011?
2011. I can
look at all of them. Okay.
I'll find the month for you and send it to you guys.
Okay. Just one quick thing before we all adjourn. I do just want to again thank Katja and Todd for their terrific service. I think you've made some very difficult times somewhat easier and have certainly applied your intellect and equanimity to the issues at hand. So thank you very much. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And that one's unanimous.
Okay.
We need an exception to that, yes.
Thank you all.
Jeff, you didn't have to.
All right, I'm
saving that for later.
All right, I'm just gonna end the meeting for all, so just to make it easy on everyone. All right.